Now
Thank
I'd like to welcome up the youth pastor, Dan Bobbitt.
And Tech Master Supreme. So halfway through the first song, I saw my wife typing on YouTube. I can see the words, but there's no video or sound, and so I fixed it. Yeah. Well, I had to go to OBS and change the thing. And then I went back, I was like, cool, that should be it. And then I realized there was no sound because the board and ProPresenter were both muted in OBS. So now ProPresenter is unmuted too because I know she'll want to hear the clip that we're going to play in a minute. But I think we're good. She said, thank you. I said, I just work here. Hi, my friends. I'm glad you're here. You guys are almost too close. I have to go like this to see all of you, but that's okay. We are in our final week of our Joshua time. Did anybody read from the book of Joshua last week? I'm telling you, thank you. Remind me of that later. I have something for you. Joshua is the summer blockbuster book of the Bible. Like I said, it's got wars, intrigue, sex. It's got lots of crazy things that we would go watch in a summer blockbuster type of movie, and we didn't have a lot of time to cover it, but we have hit 2 weeks so far, and we're going to hit one more cool story from the book of Joshua. First week, does anybody remember what we talked about? Joshua, right? We talked about the time when he was just becoming the leader of the Israelites, and God was going to lead them out of the wilderness and into the promised land. Last week we talked about, anybody? Don't be like Rahab. Yes, do be like Rahab. And her faith and how it led her to action compared to Joshua in his moment of inaction, right? And tonight we're going to talk about one more story from the book of Joshua that takes place a few years later, a couple decades later, actually. It's near the end of the book when Joshua is an old man. Anybody want to guess his age?
174.
You're a little high.
170.
You're a lot of high. 110. 110. Was that what you were going to say, Tommy? Tommy said 110. No. 110 years old to be exact. And he has one last message to share with his Israelite brothers and sisters before he dies. And so he is going to share. And this story, just like the last 2 weeks, reminds me of someone. Does anybody know who? Rocky Balboa, the Italian stallion. Yo, Adrian, right? Right? There are 6 Rocky movies where he is literally in the ring boxing, right? Except for Rocky 5, which is a street fight, but we don't talk about that one because it's not that good. And then in the recent years, there's been 2 movies called Creed, right? Which are literally about Rocky training the son of his adversary from the first movie, right? That guy that we saw in the clip 2 weeks ago. And he trains up his old rival's son, Apollo Creed, to become another boxer. And there's this moment near the end of the first Creed movie where Rocky's giving him a few words of advice before he enters the ring for the first time. So you guys want to watch that clip? I do. So we're going to. Hit the clip.
You've never been in front of this many people before, right? That don't matter. You've never been this far away from home. That don't matter. What matters is what you leave in that ring and what you take back with you. You know what that is? Pride and knowing that you did your best and you're doing it for yourself. Not for me, not your father's memory, but for you. And I can see in your eyes, you're gonna do it. Let's go now. Batman.
Right ahead. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let me come next door. Come on, man. There you go. Go top.
All right, guys. It's time. the championship.
It's time. Perfect.
Let's go, guys.
What he says to him in that clip stands out to me. What matters is that you do your best. It's time, right? And I love how basically Rocky is telling Creed, it's all boiled down to right now, right? Do your best. It's time. It's time to go after it. It's time to be all in. In other words, half measures at this point are going to get you punched in the face. You're going to get wrecked. Being distracted in this moment will get you hurt. Rocky and Creed both knew that Creed could be all in, that he could handle this moment, that he could give it his best, that he could step up. And in the last chapter of the book of Joshua, Joshua has a similar moment with the Israelites, right? Over the course of the book, the Israelites have conquered dozens of different kings. They have conquered and taken the promised land. They divvied up land and settled in it. They built homes, raised crops, have had children. They've received what God promised their people for centuries. And yet, here's the question. Do you think they were all in? Right? God has delivered them from Egypt, kept them safe for a whole generation, now destroyed the walls of Jericho like we saw, let them conquer the whole land. Do you think they were in? Maggie says no. Anybody else? Do you think they were all in? You literally, has there ever been a time in your life when you're like, okay, God, if you would just show up right now, I will completely trust you for forever. Anybody? Like a test pops up or something, you're like, I'm not ready for this test, God. If you just show up, right? Has anybody ever made that gamble with God before? Just me and Peter? Okay, some of us. If you just will help me get out of the situation. And the Israelites had just done that, right? They have overcome a whole nation of people. And here's what it says in Joshua chapter 24, verse 11 to 15 and 21 to 24. It says this, Joshua talking to the people, when you crossed the Jordan River and came to Jericho, the men of Jericho fought against you, as did the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, all the ites. But I gave you victory over them. And I sent terror ahead of you to drive out the two kings of the Amorites. It was not your swords or bows that brought you victory. I gave you victory. I gave you the land that you had not worked on. I gave you the towns you had not built. The towns where you are now still living, I gave you the vineyards and the olive groves for food, though you did not plant them. You see, in the beginning of chapter 24, Joshua had called all the Israelites together, right? He's getting near the end of his life, and he wants to tell them one last thing. He told them this simple thing that the Lord wanted them to know, right? He began recapping everything that God had done for them over the last few years. And in these verses we just read, he's reminding them that it wasn't them who did it, but who? God. Right? There's a literal story in this time frame that we didn't cover where the Israelites have to go attack this encampment of the two Amorite generals, and they sneak into the camp and they hear the people talking, freaked out about the Israelite army that's coming to destroy them, and they literally turn and kill themselves because they think the Israelites are attacking, and God delivers them, right? It wasn't by their swords. It wasn't by their bows. You see, even when they're taking down the big city of Jericho, did they do anything? No, they marched around in circles and then yelled. Have you guys ever made a building fall down by yelling at it? We could try right now. You guys want to yell really loud? Do you think this building's going to fall down? No. Blake says yes, because Blake has to be difficult. They were not some giant nation with some powerful army arriving with state-of-the-art weaponry, right? They were escaped slaves with not much more than they could carry out of Egypt and have been dragging around with them for the last 40 years in the desert. They attacked cities with giant walls. And I know today a wall doesn't seem like that much of a defense, but back in the day, has anybody ever seen Lord of the Rings or anything like it, right? A wall means that you can get up high with your archers and like destroy people where they're even like trying to climb ladders to get to you. Walls were the defense back in the day. In other words, God's reminding them that while they have gotten comfortable in their new homes, it was 100% God's power that had given them everything. It was God's power, not theirs. And here's the first thing we can see from this talk that Joshua is giving the people. And it's this, that God is faithful, right? God is faithful. I don't think there's another way to put it, right? Yes, God keeps his promises, and it's amazing for us that, right, 3,400 years later, after the time of Joshua, there's another story, right, and another reason that we can have confidence in God keeping his promises. I want you to take a look at this scripture for me. Joshua continues his message to the people, and he says this, verse 14, "So fear the Lord and serve him wholeheartedly." Right? The word fear here means a lot more respect than cry in a corner, right? The Bible tells us that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. What does that mean? Does it mean that we should all be afraid and cower away from God? No. But should we have a right understanding of who he is and how much power he has, so then we act correctly, right? I have a healthy fear of chainsaws. Right? Has anybody ever used a chainsaw before? They're scary. They can do some really cool work. They can cut a tree down or cut a log in half like that. But they can also saw through human flesh, right? So I have a healthy fear. I'm not afraid of a chainsaw, but I handle it with precautions. I wear big, thick gloves. I wear eye protection. I make sure that it's pointed away from me, and I handle it the correct way. In fact, the chainsaw is probably the only power tool I've ever read the entire instruction manual for, because I was concerned, right? Has anybody ever, here's another example. Has anybody ever heard of the Chronicles of Narnia, right? Aslan the lion. There's a great quote from the first one that says this, right? I'm just going to read it to you because it's great. If you don't know, that in the book, Aslan the lion represents God. He is Jesus in the story. And here's what they're saying, right? Susan, one of the characters, comes up and they're seeing Aslan for the first time, and she says this, "Oh, I thought he was a man." Right? Is he safe? Is he quite safe? I shall feel rather nervous meeting a lion, because they tell her he's a lion for the first time. And Mrs. Beaver says this to her, "Make no mistake, there's no one that can appear before Aslan without their knees knocking. They're either brave or they're just silly." Right? Standing before a lion, you should be afraid, unless there's a big, thick piece of plexiglass in between you and the lion, like there is at Discovery Kingdom, right? If you were face to face in nature with a lion, you should be afraid. And then Lucy asks, "Then he isn't safe?" Question mark. And Miss Beaver responds, "Of course he isn't safe. He's a lion, but he is good." Right? We serve a God who created everything and at the same time could end everything. But he loves us, right? Right? So he doesn't, because he's good. And I love that illustration because I understand it, right? I get that the beavers love Aslan. that they have an incredible respect for him, but that they also have a healthy type of fear, not a bad fear, if that makes sense, but it's this attitude that Joshua's describing when he spoke to the Israelites, right? Fear the Lord and serve him wholeheartedly. He goes on, he says, put away forever the idols your ancestors worshipped when they lived beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord alone. But if you refuse to serve the Lord, then choose today whom you will serve. Would you prefer the gods of your ancestors that they served beyond the Euphrates, or will it be the gods of the Amorites in whose land you now live? But as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. That's where it gets a little surprising, okay? The people that Joshua's speaking to, right? Who are they? They are the same people that God took as slaves out of Egypt, provided for 40 years in the desert, have just given this whole land to, and what does these verses say they're doing? They're worshiping the same old gods that they picked up while they were in Egypt. They have the family idols and statues. They're choosing to dabble within the gods of the Amorites and so on and so forth. And Joshua is telling them this time, like, it's time to get rid of your idols. Does that seem dumb to anybody else? Like, if the God of the universe literally rescued you from slavery, has cared for you for your entire life, has just knocked down the walls of the biggest city in like the land, given you the land, made you to prosper, does it seem silly that you'd still be carrying around your old family idol and worshiping it instead of him? Everybody should be agreeing with me, right? It seems kind of silly. So Joshua is trying to tell them right now, it's time to choose, right? It's our second point. It's time to choose. Here's the thing. This is how it relates to us, right? Deciding to follow God isn't some decision that you put off, right? I'll become a good Christian when I get older, when I finish college, when I'm married. I'll follow God after I quit being on this team or quit being part of this group or go to that concert that I shouldn't go to, right? I'm going to follow God. I'm giving him most of my life. That's better than what my friend at school is doing, so God should be satisfied with that, right? No, it's not. It's time to choose, Joshua says. Here's the deal. We don't get to pretend to follow God when our idols are back at home. For the Israelites, it was actual idols. For us, these idols might look like sports teams, right? Our favorite sports team, or our favorite band, or our boyfriend or girlfriend, or a job. Whatever it is that we just can't imagine our life without having, that's our idol. Does anybody have a phone in their pocket? Right? Has anybody texted someone on their phone while I've been talking? Right? Whatever it is, a lot of us have idols. We would have missionaries come to my house as a kid, and we talked to them about the cultures where they were working and other places in the world. And they're like, in the culture where we're working, it's really easy to identify the idols because we would talk to them like, yeah, they have statues of Buddha in their house or whatever. And they're like, you're blind, you're dumb. You come into an American's house and all of their furniture is pointed at what? The television. We spend hours clicking, watching, consuming. We have plenty of idols. Here's what John writes about it in the book of Revelation. This is in chapter 3, verse 15 and 16. He says this, I know that all the things you do, in all the things you do, that you are neither hot nor cold. I wish that you were one or the other, but since you are lukewarm water, neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. Now let me explain this to you. One of the churches that John was writing to was in the town called Laodicea. okay? And in Laodicea, it's sitting in the middle of, upstream from Laodicea is a hot spring, and downstream is where the water comes from the mountains and the rivers meet. And the water at the town is lukewarm and stagnant and gross. If you go there today where the rivers meet, if you go try to get the water, it's just gross. And you know what happens with stagnant water? Has anybody ever had stagnant water sitting around before? The dragonflies come lay their eggs. You get those little pincher weird bugs, right? You get mosquitoes. You get all kinds of nasty things in stagnant water. Lukewarm, gross waters. Anybody ever wanted to be refreshed before and you go get water and you drink it and it's just like room temperature or slightly warmer? Is it satisfying? No, a lot of times you want to spit it out of your mouth. That's what John is saying here. The people of this church weren't hot for God. They weren't acting like Christians that had been rescued like the Israelites. They weren't overjoyed that God had rescued them. They weren't completely walking away from God and living a cold life, right? They were just kind of lukewarm. And John said to them that being lukewarm is undesirable, right? And we see this message delivered in Joshua 24. Joshua is telling the Israelites the same thing. It's time to choose. This was not something that it was okay for them to keep putting off until later. They had a response that they had to make. And here's what he says in verse 21. He says this, "But the people answered Joshua, 'No, we will serve the Lord.'" That was the right answer, right? He gets up in front of them. Are you going to keep serving these fake gods of Egypt? Are you going to serve the gods of the nations we just conquered? Or are you going to serve the Lord? Because me and my family, we're serving God. They say, "Joshua, we will serve the Lord." "You are a witness to your own decision," Joshua said. "You've chosen to serve the Lord." "Yes," they all replied. "We are witnesses to what we have said." This is a verbal contract. They are all saying, he's saying, "Hey, in front of me, in front of God, in front of everyone else, is this what you're saying?" This is like when you get up in front of people to get married, right? And you exchange vows, and you say, "Hey, I take you, Liz, who's watching at home, to be my beloved wedded wife." And Liz says, "I take you, Dan, to be my lawfully wedded husband," whatever it was. It's a long time ago.
So romantic storytelling.
In front, you do it in front of people so that the contract is sealed. And Joshua, in front of the people, they're saying, "We are witnesses to what we've said." "All right then," Joshua said, "destroy the idols. Destroy the idols among you and turn your hearts to the Lord, the God of Israel." Then the people said to Joshua, "We will serve the Lord our God. We will obey him alone." And I've read a few different commentaries on this passage, and each of the scholars noticed the same thing. At first glance, it looks like the Israelites are saying the right words, but there's something missing. And spoiler alert is that the book of Judges that comes after this reveals that long after Joshua's death, the people begin a cycle of returning to their idols over and over, right? And in these words, they kept saying that they would obey God, but they didn't actually admit to having idols and commit to getting rid of them. Here's your third point. Don't just say the words, right? Don't just say the words. We're not Christians because we were born into a Christian family and we go to church on Sunday. We weren't Christians. We are not Christians because of our actions. We are Christians because we choose to love God and give our lives to him, right? You can tell who's a 49ers fan or a Warriors fan or a Giants fan because of the clothes they wear, right? Or the knowledge that they have about the team. But we all know they're not fans just because they bought a jersey. We all know that kid that's never watched like the cool sports team, and then all of a sudden the Seahawks win the Super Bowl and he comes to school in a Seahawks jersey the next day, and you're like, what do we call them? Bandwagon fans. Have you ever heard the word bandwagon before? Jump on the bandwagon. Or we call them a fair weather fan, right? They'll wear the team's merch when the team's doing well, but then all of a sudden the team's not doing so well. And where's their merch? At the thrift store, right? Or in their closet, right? They bought the jersey maybe because they love the team. Maybe because they want the attention. Here's the goal. The external action's supposed to reflect what's happening on the inside. And that's exactly what James is saying here, right? In James 2:14, what good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you have faith, but you don't show it in your actions? Can that kind of faith save anyone? An old Christian group, before any of you were born, called Phillips, Craig, and Dean, you were alive, wrote a song about this verse that said, faith without works is like a song you can't sing. It's about as useless as a screen door on a submarine. Now, if you think about that word picture, where do submarines go? And if the door is made of a screen door, everyone is dead, right? Faith without works, right? You have to show it by your actions. Not to get you into heaven, but it's fruit. We talked about the fruit of the Spirit before, that because the Holy Spirit's living in us, there should be change. There should be action. And here's the deal. If you're sitting here tonight, listening to this message, finding yourself thinking, yeah, it's time I choose, then I want to talk to you, or Isabel, or Blake, or Peter. We want to talk to you, right? We want to help you if there's an idol in your life and now's the time to get rid of it. Maybe you need to ask yourself some hard questions. Maybe you've been saying the words, but your actions don't reflect it, right? And I'm not talking about occasionally messing up. Who in the room sins? All of us, right? But we talked about Christians can't make a habit of sinning. We are not supposed to practice our sin. We're all sinners. But if we compare ourselves to what the Israelites were doing, this is 2 generations later, still carrying around the same idol that God had saved them from. Or they were the new generation, and God had just destroyed these kingdoms that worshiped these false gods, and they were now collecting the gods of the Amorites. And then there's us who have been going to church for maybe a while, maybe our whole lives, maybe who knows, but we're still choosing to go back to the things that we worshiped before we worshiped God. We have to follow through on choosing God. And it's a second by second, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, month by month, year by year, decade by decade, for the rest of your life decision. Right? My youth pastor always told me this one thing, and I love sharing it. Your walk with Jesus, your journey of faith, is like kayaking. Anybody ever been kayaking? It's pretty fun. You get to like paddle around. Has anybody ever been river kayaking? He's told me it's like kayaking in a river upstream, right? So it's not natural, right? I was watching kayaking in the Olympics, and they set up these like fake rivers with like really cool rapids, and the guys are like flipping and spinning, but they're always going downstream. Kayaking upstream is possible, but it's really hard. And the moment you stop paddling, guess what happens? You slow down. And you start to turn, and the water catches the front of your boat, and all of a sudden you're going back downstream. The Israelites got comfortable, right? God delivered them from their sin, delivered them from their captivity, gave them the land that he promised them, but they were still worshiping other gods. And we look at our lives as Christians, and God has stepped into human history in the form of Jesus and saved us from our sin, purified us from our unrighteousness, gave us a new life in him, and we're still doing what? We're still worshiping those false idols. Sports, popularity, online influence, whatever it is. Your opportunity is to lay it down and give it to God. Does that make sense? If you're going to take anything away from this book, right? 3 things. Be strong and courageous. You don't have to do it by yourself. You are empowered by and collected by and given the call and duty by the God of the universe to be strong and courageous. That he's going to be with you wherever you go. Then to be like Rahab, right? To when presented with the opportunity, trust God and do the hard thing. And then this last story, to choose to lay down the things that aren't from him. To choose to live a life where we serve and honor him, right? Cool. We're going to sing to that God, right? Right now, Blake and Isabel are going to come up. We're going to sing to him, and we're going to worship him, and we're going to thank him for the new life he's given us, right? And I want you to understand who you're talking to. It's that God that, right, we're supposed to fear, but in a good way, because he loves us and he's good.
All right, if you guys would stand for the last song.
I come in simplicity, longing for purity, to worship you in spirit and truth, only you. Lord, strip it all away till only you remains. 'Cause I'm coming back to my first love, only you. 'Cause you're the reason I sing, the reason I sing. Yes, my heart will sing how I love you, and forever I'll sing
Thank you guys for coming. Thank you, Stream, and by Stream.
Bye, Stream.
And I believe we have a game
Yes, we
in
do.
store. So, yeah.
Oh.
Stream says bye?
Bye, Stream.
Okay.
You gotta
Just wait for a
wait.
second.